I'm just gonna get this TLDR off the way now for those viewers that don't want to hear me rant for the next 6 minutes. The GAN 16 Maglev Max is GAN's no doubt best cube and is one of the best cubes out right now, but it suffers a similar fate as Miyu's Super Weilong V2. Its performance is just not significantly better than other flagships on the market right now, despite its price. It also has some minor issues, but despite that, the GAN 16 has a near crunchy and crispy feel that hasn't really been prominent in GAN flagships in a long time, and is one of the fastest cubes on the market right now. It is a cube that is definitely worth trying, but not necessarily one that you need to buy. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's get into the meaty stuff. If you're a cuber that has been on social media for any amount of time, you have probably seen at least one post or video about GAN's new flagship, the GAN 16 Maglev Max. Beyond all the marketing though, solving videos and performance claims, the truth is that the GAN 16 is a cube that GAN needs to perform well in order to prove that their 3x3s are still some of the best on the market, especially after the amount of mid in the last few years, and not just the cube that performs well for a specific turning niche. Now, as usual with a GAN flagship, the 16 is a relatively light 56mm 3x3 weighing in at just around 66 grams. On paper, you get all the features you expect from a modern flagship, like a dual adjustment system, maglev, core magnets, repelling edge magnets, and adjustable magnet strength. What differentiates the GAN 16 from previous models though is that it now has a complete overhaul of the overall internal piece design. Once you take out an edge, you're immediately greeted with a visible center skirt, and the corresponding edge and corner design has also been changed to accommodate this. It now more closely resembles the Weilong piece design, and the contact points have also been tweaked. Now, to say that this is a massive shift is a bit of an understatement, as GAN has used a straight cut piece design philosophy since the early models, like the GAN 357 and the original 356. While you could joke around and call it a GAN Weilong V11, the overall feel is still relatively different to the Weilongs. There is a hint of crunchiness, but the typical GAN airiness and crispiness is still present. When you are turning slowly, the track contact is also not as buttery smooth as the newer Weilongs. There's just a hint of bumpiness to it. However, once you start turning normally, you don't really notice it. The cube's sound is mildly louder than the previous GAN cubes, and it also has a bit of hollowness to it, which reminded me a bit of a Weilong V10. The corner cutting performance is also as expected of a flagship cube, but what caught me off guard though is the sheer speed of the puzzle. Out of the box, I first thought that the 16 was not as fast as the Weilong V11, but after cleaning out the factory loop and breaking in for a little bit, the cube without any loop was just uncontrollable. I kept overshooting on normal turns, and it led to quite a few lockups, but in GAN's defense, those lockups are more because of overturning, and in terms of internal lockups, GAN has improved massively in this regard. Out of the 2000-ish solves I've done, I've only had about 2 internal lockups. But still, you do think about the what-ifs, like what if GAN had just used a normal ball core design like everybody else? The magnet strength is quite interesting. GAN has taken the page out of the Weilong V11's book and made the corner edge magnets relatively weak. Why? The same can be said for the edge center magnets. I'm not sure if they're designed to prevent the cube from flexing inwards, but I do have mixed feelings about it. I don't feel that they're doing that much to the overall cube feel. But in typical GAN fashion, the core magnets are pretty strong and you can definitely feel that it's there. Add that with the repelling edge magnet and you get a cube that has very strong auto alignment and relatively decent core stability without feeling overly stiff or a strong click on the piece magnets. Combining the feel, turning characteristics, and magnet layouts together, and you get a speed cube that flows pretty well, depending on what your turning style is. In typical GAN fashion, the cube still fits a lighter turning style, although I'll personally say that the 16 is now more lenient with rougher turning than previous GAN flagships. The overall operation range of the 16 is also quite wide compared to previous models. I found myself using both loose and tight settings and both getting pretty good results. However, I did end up settling for the tighter settings. I've also not had any issues with popping or corner twists. Setting up the GAN 16 though, no, that was a bit of a journey. Tensioning the cube was okay. It's now easier to tell what settings you're on. Thank you GAN for finally filling in the setting numbers. But you still have to use the weirdly shaped fire hydrant tool. Well, it's not a major deal. It works good enough. I personally did change the center travel to 4 and the tension setting to 12, which gave me good piece contact for stability while having enough looseness to handle smaller corner cuts. In terms of the magnet rods though, I still don't really like how you have to swap them out and you have to take the entire corner out just to change the magnet strength. The system works okay, but when other brands have implemented a much more convenient system, I feel like GAN's implementation is a bit dated. I kept bouncing between the green rods and the stock white ones, but I settled on the white ones. I also still think that if you want to offer adjustability on the magnets, it would be more useful to offer it for the piece magnets and not the corner core. But oh well, what do I know? I also find it quite hilarious that GAN doesn't mention the removable repelling edge magnet in the manual itself, and also doesn't include a blank module like the MGC Beta. Cube does feel more controllable without the repelling edge magnet, but feels and sounds more hollow, which is not my cup of tea, so I just ended up just leaving it in. Here's a sound comparison between having the repelling magnet in and without it. Lubing the cube, however, was probably the most frustrating thing by far. It's not that the cube doesn't react well to lube, it reacts relatively well to most lube setups, but it's more so that the GAN 16 is the biggest lube eater that I have ever experienced in my 9 years of cubing. I've tried 7 different track lube setups, like only Gravitas, only Weight 5 and Silk, Gravitas and Weight 5, Gravitas and Silk, FZ Super Honey, and even Super Honey and Silk. All the above setups feel great and make the 16 very controllable and very smooth, but every lube combination will start feeling dry-ish after 200 solves or so. I was about to try Super Honey and Gravitas together before I just sat myself down and said, "Man, you've already tried all the heavy lubes you had in your collection and none of them lasted more than 250 solves. What makes you think that this time it would work?" Well, the funny part is that even if you take an edge out and corner, you can still see the tracks and the pieces are still lubed, but the feel of the cube will always eventually return to a lightly lubed feel. I personally prefer a more moderate lube turning feel, so to say that I was confused and had to make quite an adjustment was an understatement. I couldn't really figure out why the lube wasn't staying, so eventually I just stopped thinking and just moved on. I've done about 2,000 solves on the 16 now, and I can say that I had to add lube into the cube about 7 separate times, and that's not counting the amount of times where I had to clean out the cube entirely just to change the lube setup. I thought maybe it was just my cube, but 2 of my friends also had the exact same issue with their GAN 16s. I ended up just kind of giving up and just settling on the 7th track loop setup that I've tried, which is FZ Super Honey and Silk on the tracks, and I used a bit of Gravitas on the pieces. When the cube starts to eat lube, I'll just eventually add like a drop of Silk just to somewhat preserve the lubed feel. Regardless though, the more I used the GAN 16, the more I liked it. I've only used the GAN 16 as my main and practice cube for the last few weeks, and I can definitely say that it's more predictable than previous models, which has led to a more consistent and pleasant solving experience. Sure, I would have loved slightly stronger piece magnets, but the satisfying turning feel and consistency made me want to swap to this cube as my main. So surely this cube is amazing on all fronts, right? Bruh. $85. Now, to put this number into perspective, you can often get a number of high-performance speed cubes for less or about the same price, especially if there are sales going on. For example, if you're into big cubes, you can get the brand new Warrior M UV7x7, an Aoshi WRM 6x6, and an Ultron V6 for about the same price. That's 3 of some of the best performing big cubes on the market right now, all about the same price of one GAN 16. Or let's say you're not a big cube solver and are more into small events, you can get the Dime V2 cube, the new Sanctuary magnetic clock, and the all-reliable GAN 251M Pro. Again, 3 high-performing puzzles for the price of one GAN 16. And if you want to swap out the GAN for something else like the VIN 2x2, you can even squeeze in a single-track ALSU V7. You see the issue here? Like, I understand we are all used to GAN releasing puzzles that cost a bunch, but beyond the R&D, marketing, and performance claims, even with its relatively good performance, it's hard to justify its cost. The price only starts to feel slightly manageable when there are copious amounts of freebies, and even then it heavily depends on the store you buy it from. I got my GAN 16 from Taobao, and I got a GAN/Pokemon collab cubing mat, 2 bottles of GAN Lube 1, and some anniversary freebies like a GAN handkerchief. Why? A cube bag and a cube keychain. Granted, mine was a pre-order, which may have led to the extra goodies, but for most people, you probably would be only getting like a bottle of lube or maybe a mat. And this deal is just not getting any sweeter. And that's not to mention that I've seen some concerns with GAN QC, like unstable DAS units, clicking magnets, and rattling. Sure, this may be a small portion of the overall manufacturing batch, but for $85, you kinda don't expect these issues. It also doesn't help that the gap between a budget flagship and a true flagship these days is ever getting smaller and smaller. Cubes like the RSTRM V5, Tornado XT3, and recent MGC releases like the Beta and the Meta 3 all provide almost flagship level performance at an amazing price. Even the current world record cube, the maxed out V11 Maglev, is $30 less than a GAN 16. And even Moyu's own Super Willing V2, you know, the one that a lot of people complained was too expensive, is still mildly cheaper than the GAN 16. That's basically my conclusion of the GAN 16 Maglev Max. Like I said at the start of the video, it is definitely a return to form for flagship GAN 3x3s while introducing a refreshing and satisfying feel. It's also definitely one of the best speed cubes on the market right now. But beyond that, it's hard to justify spending on one, especially since there are a plethora of options out there that provide a better value without sacrificing performance. It also still has some typical minor GAN quirks, and Lube is essentially a requirement. Now, if you have the financial ability to buy the GAN 16, and if you don't mind spending on one, then I won't stop you. But no one needs to buy one, especially if you already own a high-performing cube. Now, as always, thank you all for watching this video. I apologize for the long rant of sorts, but it's hard to put what I feel about this cube into words and into video. I've never had a cube quite confuse me this much in terms of what I feel about it, but I do hope that my thoughts helped you out in deciding if the GAN 16 is for you. Now, after this, I don't really have any other cubes to review because I'm broke, but I might go back to posting random cubing related stuff like comp averages or some skits or something for a bit. Alright, take care everyone. Bye bye.